He was just a struggling mechanic, barely making it through each day, when a homeless woman rolled into his garage with a smoking engine and nothing but silence in her eyes. He offered to help, no questions, no charge. But what she told him next, it shook him to his core. She wasn't who she seemed. She was hiding a secret that could change both their lives forever. Before the story begins, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Drop your city name. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. The sun hadn't even burned through the early morning haze when Caleb Morgan was already under the hood of a rusted-out Dodge Dakota. His garage sat at the edge of town, squeezed between an old laundromat and a boarded-up bakery, forgotten by most but kept alive by Caleb's bare-knuckled determination and love for machines. The morning had started like every other. Grease on his hands, a growling stomach, and the low rumble of engines that couldn't speak for themselves. He didn't complain much. He'd learned a long time ago that life didn't change just because you wanted it to. You had to wrench it into place, bolt by bolt. He was wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand when he heard the cough of an engine that clearly wasn't happy. The sound wasn't from inside his garage. It came from just outside the parking lot, near the broken payphone that no one used anymore. He glanced up and saw the battered silhouette of a dusty blue car, smoke puffing from its hood like a dragon. He wasn't expecting what he saw next. A woman stepped out, tall but frail-looking, wearing an oversized army green hoodie and ripped jeans. Her face was partially hidden under the hood, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to open the car door again. She looked lost. Caleb set down the wrench and walked out slowly, hands up, not like she was dangerous, but like he didn't want to startle her. "You need help?" he asked. She hesitated, looked at him, then looked at her car, then back at him again. Her voice was soft but sharp. Yeah, I think it just died on me." "You're lucky it made it this far," Caleb said, peeking under the hood. "You got coolant leaking out like a stuck faucet. Batteries half corroded. When's the last time this thing saw a mechanic?" She bit her lip. "Too long ago." "You got a place to tow it?" She shook her head. "No, I don't really have a place." Caleb's eyes narrowed, not in judgment but understanding. Her shoes were worn thin. She had a backpack slung tight across her shoulders like she didn't dare let it out of her sight. Her hoodie looked like it had been through a war. "All right," he said simply. "Let me pull it into the bay. You can sit inside for now." "You're not going to charge me?" she asked, voice stiff with caution. Caleb smiled, half sarcastic. "Lady, I barely charge people who can pay. Hop in." She didn't thank him, but she did sit quietly in the corner of the garage as he worked, watching him, studying him, and that's when he noticed it. She wasn't just cold, she was calculating. There was something behind those guarded eyes, something he couldn't quite name. And yet, for all her silence, there was something that made him keep talking. Maybe it was the way she looked at his tools, or how she asked about the software he used to check diagnostics. "Name's Caleb," he finally said, still under the hood. She didn't answer for a moment. Then, softly, "Jenna." He glanced at her. "Well, Jenna, your ride's on life. Support might need a miracle to get this thing breathing again." She let out a weak chuckle. "I used to be good at miracles." That line hung in the air longer than it should have. Caleb didn't push her to explain what she meant by miracles. People who looked like they were holding the weight of the world in a backpack didn't drop details easily. But something about her quiet confidence and that weird, flickering sadness in her eyes stuck with him. By the time he replaced the radiator hose and rigged a temporary battery bypass, the afternoon heat had started to settle in. Jenna hadn't moved much, just occasionally warmed her hands around the mug of coffee he'd handed her earlier, the last of what he had in the pot. He noticed she drank it slow, like she was rationing the warmth itself. "You a coder?" he asked suddenly. Jenna blinked, surprised. "What makes you ask that?" You keep staring at my diagnostic screen like you understand it. Most folks just stare at the flashing lights and think it's alien. She hesitated, then said carefully, "Used to run a team back in Seattle. AI-focused tools for logistics, predictive resource tracking, stuff like that." Caleb tilted his head. "Used to?" Jenna sighed and looked away. "Long story." He sat on the rolling stool across from her and gestured around the garage. "You got eyes, don't you?" "I got time." She gave him a long look, like she was weighing the risks. But something about Caleb, his worn flannel shirt, the way his hands were always moving like they couldn't sit still unless they were fixing something, made her speak. "Was a co-founder," she said slowly. 3 years ago I was pitching to VC firms and sitting in boardrooms. Then my partner siphoned half our funding into a side company and ghosted. The board replaced me. I lost equity in a legal loophole. And the media loved the fall from grace angle. Add the market crash 6 months later. She gave a brittle smile. I ran out of friends and places to crash. Ended up in this town because the bus was cheap. Caleb let out a low whistle. "Damn, that's rough." Jenna didn't flinch. "That's tech." He stood and walked over to a shelf, grabbing a bag of trail mix. He tossed it to her. "Well, I don't have an AI startup, but I got carbs and coolant. Eat." She caught it, startled. "Why are you being nice to me?" He shrugged. "You're a person. Car broke down. I fix things." She smiled then, genuinely, if briefly. "Not a lot of people think like that anymore." Caleb smirked. "Maybe the world just needs more people with socket wrenches and less ego." He didn't say it, but he was thinking about himself. About the second mortgage on the shop, the unpaid invoices, the dreams he used to have about opening a second garage with a real sign, about his ex-wife calling him a lifelong failure with dirty hands. And still, he helped, because he knew what rock bottom looked like, and Jenna wasn't far from it. "Your startup?" he asked. "You ever think about rebuilding it?" She looked surprised again. "What? With this car and a hotspot connection?" He laughed. "Well, you got ideas. I got a garage. I know it smells like oil and desperation, but it's got Wi-Fi and a coffee pot that works sometimes." Jenna's eyes narrowed, this time in thought. "You serious?" "Look," Caleb said, his voice turning low and sincere. "You remind me of something I forgot I had. Fire. You're still burning, even if the world dumped a rainstorm on you. Maybe you just need a dry place to start a new spark." And right then, under the cracked neon light of that forgotten garage, a new partnership quietly ignited. The next morning, Caleb arrived at the shop earlier than usual. He didn't know what he expected, but Jenna was already there. She was, sitting cross-legged on the garage floor with her laptop open and a bunch of sticky notes fanned out around her like a battle plan. The same hoodie covered her frame, but her face looked sharper, more alive. He noticed the laptop had a cracked corner and the spacebar was missing. Still, her fingers moved fast and her mind clearly hadn't dulled from the time on the streets. Caleb cleared his throat. "Hope you're not charging me consulting fees yet." Jenna looked up and actually chuckled. "Not unless you're offering stock options in carburetors." They shared a moment of tired laughter. The air smelled of rust and burnt coffee. Jenna had found the old coffee maker in the back and somehow coaxed it into life. Caleb poured himself a cup and sat next to her on the concrete floor, surprised by how natural it felt. "I thought about what you said yesterday," she said. "About starting over." Caleb nodded. "Yeah?" She tapped the screen. "I still have access to the core design of my original tool. My co-founder couldn't touch that. It was my IP. It's old code, but it's powerful. Predictive optimization for supply chains. I just need a space to run a prototype." Caleb looked around the dusty garage. "What do you need? Wi-Fi and 4 walls?" Jenna smiled. "That's a start, a quiet place where I'm not looking over my shoulder or sleeping with one eye open." "You'll have that here." Just don't mind the occasional engine block crashing to the floor. She paused, then asked, "Why are you doing this, Caleb?" He sipped the bitter coffee. "Because no one did it for me when I needed it. I know what it's like to be seen as someone who'll never make it." A silence stretched between them, but not the awkward kind, the kind that meant something was settling into place. By the end of the week, the garage had changed. Half the corner was now cleared, and Caleb's old workbench had been turned into a makeshift desk. Jenna cleaned her laptop daily, ran code tests late into the night, and even taught Caleb how to navigate basic UI builds. "Click that," she said one evening, pointing at the screen. Caleb squinted. "That? No, not the giant red stop, but the one next to it." He clicked it, and lines of code flew across the screen. "You know this stuff is like wizardry, right?" She smirked. "You rebuild engines from metal scraps. That's wizardry too." They worked well together, Jenna with her tech instincts and visionary brain, Caleb with his grounded logic and practical fixes. When her laptop crashed from a heating issue, he opened it up and jury-rigged a cooling fan using parts from an old Chevy's AC unit. "This isn't how I thought I'd be rebooting my company," she said one night, eyes tired but glowing. Caleb leaned against the tool cart, "and I didn't think I'd be learning JavaScript at 36. Their bond was no longer just one of circumstance. It was collaboration, kindness without agenda, a spark of belief where there was none before. But every rising tide hits a wall." One afternoon, a man in a slick suit showed up at the garage, holding a clipboard and smiling like he'd never worked a hard day in his life. "I'm looking for Jenna Riley," he said. "You're a hard woman to track down." Jenna froze. Caleb stood instinctively between them. "Who are you?" "Name's Tyler Briggs. Jenna and I used to work together on her previous company. She never did sign those last documents, and technically, she's still under a non-compete." Jenna's voice cracked. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," Tyler said, stepping closer. "You're coding again, right? That's a violation. And this," he waved his clipboard, "is your cease and desist." Caleb stepped forward. "You got a problem. You deal with both of us," Tyler sneered. "And who are you? Her mechanic?" "Yeah, and her business partner." Tyler blinked. "Now get off my property," Caleb growled. The suit hesitated, then slowly backed away. "This isn't over, Jenna. You should have stayed buried." As his car pulled away, Jenna dropped her eyes. "I knew this would happen. I tried to outrun it." Caleb placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we face it, together." And just like that, the stakes had changed. The fight wasn't just about restarting a startup anymore. It was about reclaiming what was stolen. The mood inside the garage shifted after that visit. The dusty comfort was replaced by a quiet tension, like the storm had knocked once and promised it would return louder. Caleb found Jenna that night sitting outside on an old milk crate behind the shop. The stars overhead looked almost close enough to touch, but her eyes were fixed on the ground. He sat beside her, hands resting on his knees. "You okay?" She didn't answer at first. Then finally, "I thought I could start again. Clean, quiet, hidden." "You still can." Jenna exhaled a brittle laugh. "You don't know how ruthless Tyler is. The moment he smells momentum, he'll tear everything apart. He's backed by people with deep pockets. All they have to do is bury me in paperwork." Caleb's voice was calm, steady. "You think paperwork scares me? I rebuild engines with holes in their hearts. I solder life into dead circuits. I made this place work with nothing but busted tools and a bad coffee machine. We can take him." She turned her face toward him. "You really believe that?" "I believe in you," Caleb said simply. "And I believe in what we're building." That night, they worked until dawn, not just coding, planning. Jenna restructured her app under a new framework, rewriting enough of the back end to sidestep the non-compete. Caleb reached out to one of his old friends, an ex-Marine turned cybersecurity expert, who agreed to look over her code for vulnerabilities and legal tripwires. "You're rebuilding this like a muscle car," Caleb told her. Jenna grinned for the first time in days. "That's because I've got a grease-stained Yoda teaching me the ropes." They moved fast. Jenna's platform, an AI-driven logistics optimizer, began to breathe again. With Caleb's help, they set up a website, a demo, a pitch deck. He even helped redesign the UI interface, drawing inspiration from his garage, a dashboard-style layout that made sense to regular folks. "You just made AI look not terrifying," she told him one night, genuinely impressed. He smiled. "Well, people fix what they understand. We just gotta give them the right tools." Word began to spread, slowly at first. A tweet from an industry micro-influencer. In cold email turned warm reply. Then a call from a local manufacturer, desperate to reduce waste in their supply chain. "They're asking for a demo next week," Jenna said breathlessly one morning. "Then we give 'em the best damn demo they've ever seen," Caleb replied, clapping her on the shoulder. "But the world doesn't let people rise quietly." 2 nights before the pitch, they returned to the garage after a grocery run and found the front window smashed in, papers scattered, Jenna's hard drive missing, Caleb's laptop soaked in oil. Jenna fell to her knees. "No! No, no, no!" Caleb stared at the damage, hands clenched at his sides. "It was him. There's no backup," Jenna whispered. "That drive had the latest build." Caleb knelt beside her. "You have the code in your head, right?" She nodded barely. "Then we rebuild. Tonight. We don't stop." "I can't. Caleb, I can't do this again." He turned her shoulders to face him. "Jenna, listen to me. You walked into my broken life and lit a spark. Don't let some coward with a clipboard take that from you." Her eyes glistened. She nodded. "Okay." They worked for 36 hours straight. Friends of Caleb's dropped by with pizza and coffee. One old mechanic brought his daughter's unused laptop. Jenna recoded while Caleb handled calls and rebuilt the interface from memory. They didn't sleep, didn't stop, just kept going. And when the demo day came, they didn't show up in suits or with slides. They showed up in worn clothes, exhausted but standing tall. Jenna spoke with fire in her voice. Caleb stood beside her, not as the mechanic who offered her help, but as her co-founder. When the screens lit up and the software ran smoother than ever, the room fell quiet, and then came the claps. Real, loud, lasting. The first investor approached. Before they'd even left the building. 3 months later, the garage didn't smell like oil anymore. Not entirely. The sharp tang of burnt rubber had been replaced by something new. Printer ink, fresh wood, the low hum of servers, and the scent of late-night takeout from the Vietnamese place down the road. Caleb still wore his flannel shirts, but now he swapped engine grease for data diagrams. His garage, once a forgotten mechanic's outpost, was now the headquarters of Sparkline, the tech startup Jenna had rebuilt from nothing. The two of them had registered the company together, 50-50. The first client had turned into 3, then 10. Then a manufacturing conglomerate offered a contract that required them to scale up overnight. And the investors, they weren't just interested, they were chasing Jenna now. But she didn't forget who stood with her when the lights went out. Caleb sat at his new workstation, poring over a logistics dashboard that he understood far better than he thought he ever would. Jenna walked in with 2 mugs of coffee, her hoodie replaced by a soft blazer and jeans. Still casual, still her. "You've been up since 5 again?" she asked, handing him a cup. "Habit," Caleb grinned. "Old engines or new platforms, my brain still fires up at dawn. You've adapted more than anyone I've ever seen," she said softly. He shrugged. "I didn't know I could learn all this stuff until you made it feel like I wasn't too late." Jenna hesitated, then sat beside him. "You saved me." Caleb turned, brow raised. "I fixed your radiator." No, Caleb, you saw me. When I had nothing but broken dreams and a dying laptop, you gave me space. You gave me dignity. He looked away for a moment, swallowing. You saved me too. You just did it with code instead of a carburetor. They sat in quiet understanding. No dramatic music, no speeches, just two people who had walked through fire, leaned on each other, and come out not just surviving, but building. Later that day, they received an unexpected email from Tyler. Subject: Congratulations, body. Seems like you've bounced back. I underestimated you. Let me know if you ever want to cash out. There are people watching. Jenna stared at the screen for a while, then clicked reply. She typed, thanks for watching, but I'd rather build than cash out. P.S. The best engines start with a spark, and I found mine in a garage. She hit send without blinking. That night, the Sparkline team, now 5 employees strong, celebrated their 3rd signed contract. The once cold garage buzzed with laughter, screens, and open pizza boxes. Caleb stood back and watched it all. He hadn't just fixed a car that day. He'd rebuilt his life, and all because he said yes to a stranger who looked like she had nothing. But in reality, she had everything, and together they were just getting started.